Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to do a collaboration beer, and this one is really quite interesting. So it's half Swedish and half Irish. The Irish part is Whiplash Brewing, who are from County Kildare in Ireland, and the Swedish part is Beerbliotek, who are from Gothenburg, or Göteborg as you'd say in Swedish, in Sweden on the west coast. A very, very good beer city these days. But this is a really interesting one because, as I've told you before, when I've reviewed Beerbliotek beers before, these guys never produce the same beer more than once, and Whiplash are another one who seem to have taken that idea. So this is a really quite interesting collaboration, I'm sure. But this one is called What Else Is New. It's a Belgian style quadrupel. It's got rye and figs added to it, so it should be a really interesting beer, and it comes in at 9% ABV. It didn't have a rating on Untappd, it didn't have a rating on Rate Beer or Beer Advocate when I checked it out earlier, but it had 3.8 on Untappd, and knowing these breweries, I think this will be a really quite interesting beer. Both very experimental breweries and both known to produce some good quality things. The pale ale that I had from Whiplash last time was my first review from them, and it was pretty damn good, and I've reviewed maybe 5 or 6 different beers involving Beerbliotek now, and they always tend to be a good standard. So definitely looking forward to this one, and as always I hope you guys enjoy my take on this beer. So anyway, as is usual with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the breweries involved here. If you want to get straight to the tasting, of course, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the description below. That's the brewery websites, the link to my other reviews that I've done both from Whiplash and from Beerbliotek. There will be more in the near future, of course. There's all the usual social media. If you want to see more beer reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city or state, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlist of beers from different countries. There are ones there both from my Irish reviews and from my Swedish reviews. Those are constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys, and the support that you're showing the channel is hugely appreciated. Do in particular let me know about some other Irish beers, because Irish beer really is starting to take off these days. But anyway, let's kick off with Whiplash Brewery then. So Whiplash is the side project of Alex Laws, who is the brewer at Rye River Brewing in Selbridge in County Kildare in Ireland, just out to the west of Dublin if I'm remembering correctly. But he called the brewery Whiplash basically as a jibe at how fast the craft beer industry is moving, and the company is also co-owned by Alan Wolfe, who is the big boss at Rye River Brewing. So Alex was a home brewer and took part in various home brewing competitions across Ireland before he later decided to turn professional, and he worked for Brewtonic for a while and also for Otterbank as well. But he was later involved in setting up Rye River Brewery, which were actually the first new built brewery in Ireland, or new built microbrewery I should say, for over 100 years. But he wanted to continue producing his own beers, and Rye River have been really, really supportive of this. So many of the Whiplash beers are actually brewed in Rye River's brewing facility. But Alex plans and brews the beers, makes his own recipes and things like this, while Alan deals with things like getting the labels printed, getting the tank space sorted out, ordering the bottles and the cans, and also getting the beers out there for sale. It's only recently that we've actually started to see these beers in Scotland and Ireland and places like that. But as of late 2017, they produced something like 15 or 16 different beers under the Whiplash name, which is pretty cool, and they do seem to be very experimental. Like I was saying with Beerbliotek, these guys seem to never produce the same beer more than once, although they probably do keep records of the recipe if one is particularly popular. But a really interesting concept, and I'm sure Whiplash, in my experience, I'm pretty sure they're going to do well over the next little while. So hopefully their growth can match that. But anyway, on to Beerbliotek a little bit then. So as I've told you before, this brewery is based in Gothenburg. They were founded back in 2013 by a multinational group of friends. So this is Adam Norman, who's Australian, Richard Bull, who's from New Zealand, Anders Hedlund and Daryl Denecker, who are from South Africa. So Anders Hedlund is actually Swedish, I should say that. But Adam and Richard ran Bar Doppio in Gothenburg, and Daryl and Anders were regular customers there, and they often used to talk about beer. So one day they decided to purchase a kit and started brewing their own beer. But the brewery's in the old Klipan Sugar building, and it's a really nice old building that's actually very close to the old Carnegie Brewery in Gothenburg, one of the kind of most famous companies in the country actually, if you go back to the old Carnegie Porters and things like that. But their brew kit is from Brewfab in Scotland, and in their first year they apparently produced 38 different varieties of beer, and all their beers are brewed in small batches, and they do this basically because they want to stick to the kind of roots of home brewing. So they've got no fixed range, and they're always brewing brand new beers. They said that they basically wanted people to go into restaurants and things like this and actually ask, oh, is there anything new from Beerbliotek, rather than have you got this beer from Beerbliotek. Beerbliotek. But the idea behind the name Beerbliotek was essentially that they wanted to create a library of beers so that their customers can always learn something new about different yeasts, different hops, and different malts, and all these sorts of things. So they basically want to create a library of different beers. And like I say, they never, as far as I know, they never brew the same beer more than once. And it's a really interesting concept, actually. The one frustrating thing about it in Sweden, though, is that it does take so long to get beers into Systembolaget. So that's the one downside about this brewery. It would be a very, very good model, for example, in Denmark, and of course the Beerbliotek beers are exported over there, but the one frustrating thing is that it's actually easier to get the different Beerbliotek beers in Denmark than it is in Sweden. So hopefully the Swedish government can come up with a way to change the laws a little bit. They are starting to liberalise it a little bit for the craft breweries coming through, but that is the one kind of downside to Beerbliotek, is you can't get a lot of these different beers to drink at home in Sweden. You can get them in restaurants and stuff like this. These guys, of course, are involved with the Brewers Bar in Gothenburg as well, which is somewhere you really do need to check out. Gothenburg, of course, is a really good beer city these days. Probably the best one in Sweden, actually, although some people might debate that. But two very, very interesting breweries involved in this one. Like I was saying, the brewery websites are in the description below, and you can have a little look at those for yourself. But let's get on to the tasting of this beer itself. So yeah, like I mentioned to you, this one is a 9% quadrupel, this one. So it's got fig and rye in it. What else is new? Some nice artwork there. Whiplash, of course, do seem to be going for this kind of almost minimalist style artwork, very similar to what the likes of Trillium and Cloudwater and all these things are doing. As I was mentioning in my recent Trillium reviews, it seems that a lot of the European breweries now are kind of copying these sort of white style cans that you get from America. It just says in here, brewed by Whiplash for Whiplash at Rye River in County Kildare in Ireland. There you can see all the stuff. A couple of different units there, 4 UK units in this one, which of course is good. And you can see down here, here is the Beerbliotek symbol. Normally Beerbliotek, of course, do their beers in little 330ml cans. But without further ado then, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. A little bit of spark as I've opened it up, but let's go for it. And that is actually a lot brighter than I was expecting. It's actually quite a coppery colour, this beer, which is interesting. Sort of coppery mahogany colour. And you can smell some of that nice figgy character coming out of it as you open it up. But yeah, look at that. As you can see from the colour of this one, I'm not sure how well you're seeing that on the camera. Let me just move the light. You can see this beer to me is really nice and coppery, actually. I think that's a really good way to describe this one. There's quite a few big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass. The head on this one, incidentally, is quite a sort of beigey, sort of cream colour, but lots of big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass. And this one, usually I've always found the Belgian yeasts do make the Belgian style beers quite carbonated, but I would say definitely this is a nice kind of coppery, maybe even blood orangey. It's maybe got a bit of that dark blood orange character to it, and if I put my fingers behind it, it is slightly hazy, but really it is quite clear compared to what I've seen some Belgian beers being. You can get really clear ones, but you do get quite hazy ones as well. This one's a little bit clearer than I would normally expect from some of the Belgian beers, other than the blondes and stuff, of course. But yeah, it looks really nice, and you're definitely getting some of this nice toasty brown sugar element that you would expect of the Belgian quadrupels, but it smells really nice. So let's take a closer look at that aroma now and just see how we get on. Ooh, yeah. That's really interesting. This beer, oddly enough, it's actually reminding me of some of the German Dunkels a little bit, because of that rye character. Some of the German Dunkels can just have that little bit of almost German rye bready quality. Some of the Doppelbocks have that as well. But usually, in my experience, when you have a quadrupel, it does have a little bit of that, but usually the brown sugars are a little bit more kind of punchy, if that makes sense. Usually the brown sugars are coming to the fore just a little bit more than they are in this one. So it's a really, as I always say, take a little bit of time to take in the aroma of your beers before you actually get stuck into them. But this is really interesting. But yeah, with this one you can smell that big rye bready base. It actually smells quite like German rye bread in my experience. But there's some nice caramel on top of that. You can smell a little bit of that sort of syrupy kind of booziness that you'd expect. That you'd expect from the Belgian quadruple, but it's not quite as prominent as I was expecting it would be. But the rye, as you would expect from the name, is quite prominent. Yeah, so some caramel, some biscuits in there. A little bit of that grainy character as well, which is quite interesting. And there's a good bit of juicy fruitiness this one. You can pick out the figs there. I think there's a little bit of sharpness from some sort of raisiny kind of character. I think there's a little bit of raisiny note in this one. It's almost got a little bit of a kind of medicinal quality as well to it, which is quite common in some of these Belgian beers. I always find it a little bit more in the likes of the Patters beers and the Dubels, but you can pick out a little bit of that almost kind of cough syrupy, medicine-y type note out of this beer as well, and that kind of slightly herbal quality from the hops. But it smells really, really quite nice actually. So as I always say, just take a little bit of time to enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. This one is really interesting just because the figs, and particularly the rye. The rye is the one that's really jumping out at me in this one. So just take a little bit of time and enjoy that for yourself. But yeah, without further ado then, let's get stuck into this one. So this is the What Else Is New, a collaboration beer between Whiplash Brewing in County Kildare in Ireland and Beerbliotek from Göteborg over in Sweden. So let's get stuck into this one. Slange Skål. Yeah, in terms of flavour, it's pretty nice. But one thing I would say about it, it certainly doesn't have the mouthfeel that you'd expect from a Belgian quadruple. It's not quite as syrupy as you might expect from that style of beer. And I'm pretty sure I'm serving it at the right temperature, because you should have it about 8, 9, 10 degrees for a quadrupel. But yeah, certainly in terms of flavour, it is nice. Maybe it's just the Irish water. This beer, of course, will be brewed using the Irish water. And the Irish water and the Scottish waters, they do tend to have that almost kind of clean feel to them. It really can affect your brewing quite a little bit, I would say. The water that you use in it, the different mineral contents can flavour the water. There's no doubt about that. And it can affect the mouthfeel. And in this one, you really can feel the sort of cleanliness of the water, and that makes the beer perhaps just feel a little bit lighter than it is, but you're getting all the flavour there. And that's one of the things I always remember talking about Icelandic beer, having that really almost minerally quality to the water. This one actually does remind me a little bit of that, the likes of Borg, Brughus and all of these kind of things up in Iceland. But it's a nice beer, this, make no mistake about that. But yeah, so yeah, with this one, as you would expect by the description of it, you can feel that nice bready base there, just kind of underpinning the beer. It's rye. There's no way to kind of get around that. It doesn't quite taste like German rye bread in the same way that I was picking up in the aroma. It really smelt like some of that German rye bread, but it's a little bit smoother than that. The German rye bread, as I always say, it just has a little bit of sweetness to it, but the rye in this one is just a little bit smoother than that. You can feel some of the sort of thicker caramelly notes pushing their way out. As you go further and further into the aftertaste, the sort of malty flavours that you get in this one start to push their way out a little bit more, and it's really quite interesting. But yeah, you can feel that nice smooth bready base to it. The caramelly and the biscuity flavours are sitting right in the middle of your palate, but that sort of grainy rye character just pushes itself out a little bit later on, and you can taste there's a little bit of that almost herbal quality just kind of creeping in from the hops too. But everything goes together really quite well in this beer. That's what it's all about. There's almost a little bit of a slightly woody, spicy flavour comes out towards the front of the tongue in the aftertaste in this one as well. A lot of the complexity with these quadrupel beers, of course, does come out in the aftertaste, so just bear that in mind when you try it. But yeah, that's pretty nice, that. Definitely, pretty much completely different from what you get from a Belgian quadruple, if that makes sense, but definitely quite an interesting take on the style, I would say. In the back corners of the palate, you can feel there's a little bit of a little touch of earthiness there, but as you come forward along the sides of the tongue, where you start to get the hoppy characters, you can feel there's a little bit of that herbal quality, and that's almost given the beer just a little bit of that kind of medicinal feel to it, if you like. Around the front curve of the palate, you can pick up a tiny little bit of floral character, then round the very front curve of the tongue, it's just a little bit lighter and grassy, but it still maintains that kind of herbal quality, which is quite interesting. If you just go behind the front curve of the palate there, you can pick up a little bit of that juicy, that little oily bubble that I always talk about, where the fruity esters come out. For me, the fruits in this one, it's quite a candied fruit ester. It reminds me of the little heart-shaped sweets that you get in Haribo Star Mix. It's got that kind of flavour to it, but around the kind of front curve of the tongue, you can feel a little bit of that sort of figgy flavour coming out of it too. The key difference when you actually add fruit to a beer, you can always tell, because the edges of your palate, instead of feeling really kind of dry and bitter from the hops, they do feel just that little bit more juicy, and you will get the fruity flavours around the edge of your tongue rather than simply behind the very front curve of your palate there. That's how you always tell, and you can pick that up a little bit in this beer. Yeah, I would say that. You get a little bit of bitterness from the hops, but you can feel the figs just kind of on the edge of your tongue there. There is a little bit of that figgy character. There's a little bit of the slightly sharper plums and maybe some kind of raisiny or sultana flavour in there as well. Probably more sultanas than anything else, but behind the front curve of the palate, as I say, you'll just feel that little oily bubble and those fruity esters just pushing their way out. But it's a really quite nice beer. It's definitely, in terms of flavour and things, it's really quite different from what you'd get from the likes of you know, Untappd Quadrupel or something like this. It's really quite different from like even like Westfletcher 12 and all of these kind of things. But it's a really nice beer nonetheless. It definitely has a little bit of an almost German quality to it, with the kind of rye as well. Like as I was saying, I wasn't picking up much of that German rye kind of quality to it, but as you know, as your mouth adjusts to it, you start to pick up slightly different flavours to this one. There is a bit of an almost woody and leathery flavour develops in this one after a little while, but it's a nice beer. I certainly wouldn't hesitate to drink it again. It'd probably go quite well with a Christmas pudding, this beer, to be quite honest with you. I don't know if this was released as a sort of Christmas seasonal or exactly what they were doing with it, but it's certainly a nice beer, and in terms of going with dessert, I think that's a good time to try this one. I'm just trying it just to try it basically, but a really interesting beer, this one. So if you want things that test your palate, this is what you want as a beer reviewer. Have a go at this, because it is really quite unusual. In terms of the mouthfeel then, I'd say it's mid-bodied. In terms of a quadruple though, it's quite a bit lighter than you might expect. Carbonation in this one is quite smooth. It does have a little bit of that oily character to it, but more of a wet mouthfeel. It's not quite as oily as you would normally expect from a Belgian quadrupel, rather than it definitely has a little bit of that kind of Irish water quality to it, if that makes sense. It's got the cleanliness that you expect of kind of Scottish Irish water kind of thing to it, which is quite nice. It's a different take on the style. It's a little bit easier to drink, I guess, than some of the Belgian ones in that sense. You'd probably session this a little bit more, even though it's only 9%. There's a little bit of that oily character, like I was saying. There's a nice herbal quality from the hops. The malt base has a little bit of sweetness and also a little bit of that grainy character as well. There's some nice juicy fruits, and just everything in this beer blends together really well. It's a really interesting take on the style, and I'm glad that I got to try it. And it is cool to see Whiplash and Beerbliotek, two breweries with quite similar ideologies, get round to doing a collaboration. So I'm really glad I got to try this one. Like I said, I bought it from Durham Wines. This review will probably publish around Christmas time, so you might get lucky and find some of it in there. But have a go at this beer and see what you think of it for yourself. Two really good breweries involved in this one, and they have made quite an interesting creation. That's what it's all about. It's all about experimentation. But it's a really nice, quite Christmassy beer, and it will be good for your desserts as well. So yeah, that's all I've really got to say about this one. It's been really cool to review it for you. As always, let me know your own thoughts on it in the comment section below. Thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your thoughts on the beer, like I said. Let me know your favourite beers from both breweries involved here, and I will catch you guys very soon. So until the next time, it's Slangy just now, and I will catch you guys very soon. What else is new? A collaboration between Whiplash from County Kildare in Ireland and Beerbliotek from Gothenburg in Sweden. Slangy just now.